Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 317, Healthy Boundaries for a New Year. Well, before we get into today's episode, I want to acknowledge something really important. This week has been heavy for a lot of people. Many of you are feeling shaken, unsettled, or more aware of how unsafe the world can feel, especially for women. And when events like this happen, we need to remember that our nervous systems register it even if we weren't directly involved. And that impacts how we show up, how much capacity we have, and how hard it can feel to hold boundaries. And I think that context matters for today's conversation. Well, as you know, all month on the podcast, we're not chasing resolutions or pushing for reinventions or really focusing on recentering ourselves, looking at honesty, steadiness, taking some time, getting still, and getting back in touch. And I hope you've been able to practice some of that for yourself, even though I know, ironically, with everything going on, it may have been hard. But without tragedy and trauma happening, once people start to feel a little more grounded, the next thing they usually notice is this. They start realizing things like, I'm tired of explaining myself. I'm tired of feeling pulled. Or maybe I'm tired of feeling guilty for needing space or something for me. And that's often the moment boundaries come into focus, not as a theory, but as a necessity. And so today we're going to be talking about what healthy boundaries actually look like in real life, especially the subtle ways they're tested and how to respond with a little more clarity and self-respect without becoming hard or shut down or so defended and unreachable. So why do boundaries feel really tender at the start of the year? Well, January is when a lot of us are trying to reset. We're trying to reclaim some energy. Maybe we're trying to simplify. Maybe we're ready to make the big changes that we were putting off till after the holidays were over. And we're not distracted by the holidays and all the things that come along with that. But here's the thing, you may be wanting to do these great things, but others may still expect the old version of you. Maybe that was, like we've been talking about here lately, the overgiver, the flexible one, the one to clean everything up, the one to be the project manager in the home and do all the thought load. Maybe the really flexible one who's willing to drop what they had going on for them because someone else piled too much on their plate. And boundaries often feel hardest not because they're wrong, but because they're new. They're new, and this is such a developmental process. And when you change your relationship with yourself, other relationships are going to feel it. And that's often the hardest part for people. And I work with clients around this all the time, which is why, you know what I'm going to say, having some healthy folks around you when you're doing this stuff really matters. So let's talk about those wonderful people in our life and how do we know that they may have boundary issues and issues with our boundaries. So here are 5 subtle signs maybe someone doesn't respect boundaries. They're just not there yet. And if any of you have been working on boundaries for some time, you can look back on the timeline and see where you were and you can understand. And I want to make sure we recognize that these are the subtle signs, not the obvious ones. And that's really important. Especially back to your nervous system, if you don't feel safe, there's something going on, maybe too subtle to notice it first, but it's really important that we hone in. Well, the first one is they minimize your needs, but they do this very insidiously. Like they don't outright say no to your boundary. They downplay it. They minimize it. Minimizing is a form of manipulation even if they're just fear-based trying to fix your feelings because they don't want you to be unhappy. Things like, oh, it's not a big deal, or you're overthinking it. It's not a big thing. Just do it. And minimization is a way of bypassing your reality. And it's telling you not to trust your inner truth. Even, I want to stop here, even if you're making a BFD out of something, again, you're the only one who gets to decide whether you're making a mountain of a molehill, whether you're letting fear run the show and it's not based in truth. But you're not going to be able to do that, to discern that, until first you can trust yourself. No one has a right to tell you what's real. Only you have that right. So they minimize your needs, and they do it very subtly. They're trying to fix your feelings. Oh, it's going to be okay. Focus on the good stuff. Focus on gratitude. And gratitude is great as long as we're not, again, bypassing our reality. And our reality might be, this last week was really hard. Our reality might be, that really hurt my feelings when that person let me down. The reality might be, I'm feeling a little triggered. I think this is one of those little micro traumas in this relationship, and I don't feel safe, and I don't feel okay. Another subtle way that someone doesn't respect your boundaries is they agree, like they're not combative, but they don't follow through. They're like, yeah, sure, sounds great, happy to do it. They say they understand, and then they do the same damn thing again and again and again. And so it messes with your head because they're not saying, well, that's crap, I'm not doing that, you don't need that, right? Which is toxic as well. But I almost wonder if this isn't worse because there's nothing to argue with. They're like, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And your brain's like, oh, good, I can trust. Oh, good, I can relax. Oh, good, I don't have to worry about this. But then later, when no one's looking, they drop the ball and they do the same thing again. And so respect isn't shown through their words. It's shown to you through changed behavior. And remember that quote, sorry without change is just manipulation. Yeah, an apology without an adjustment is not accountability. It's not them taking responsibility. It's them BSing you to get you off their back. It's very selfish. Even if the core of their selfishness is avoidance, that's about them. That is not for you to figure out. The third one is they make your boundary about their feelings. So suddenly your no becomes their disappointment, their stress, their hurt. And this is where so many people tell me that they end up collapsing their boundaries, not because they don't mean them, but because they don't want to cause pain. They don't want to be that bad guy. And probably growing up, they got that vibe in the family. Like people who say no are actually selfish and uncaring and self-absorbed and all the things. And that they don't care, quote unquote, about their sister. And that's not true. That's why so much boundary work is education, re-educating ourselves, what's healthy, what's not, what's crazy, what isn't. The fourth way they subtly can't respect your boundaries is they test instead of asking. Boy, do I see this happen. They push a little, they hint, they bring it up for the 14th time within a couple of days. They wait to see if you'll cave. That's manipulation. That's disrespecting your no. When I work with relationships and I see that, I tell that person, you know what? You're giving them code for, I don't care about your boundaries and I'm not in acceptance of them. And therefore I can't abide by them. Healthy people instead ask, hey, I want to make sure, is this your no is clear, right? I want to make sure I have this so that I don't overstep. Boundary pushers test. The fifth thing is you feel uneasy even when nothing bad happened. Again, these things are very subtle and insidious. Like your body tightens, you keep replaying the interaction in your head, you know what I'm talking about, when you're trying to fall asleep. You feel really irritated, but you can't explain why, like you can't put your finger on anything concrete. Well, often that's your nervous system recognizing a lack of respect before your logical mind catches up. And remember, discomfort is often very important information. It's not an overreaction. It's not. And I want you to think for a moment, who have you felt that around and who have you not felt that around? And where's the rest of the data around that? Where's the context? Where's the history with each of those people? So where's the why? It'll all start making sense and adding up as you look at all the puzzle pieces. So we want to talk about why boundaries aren't necessarily walls. And this prevents people from swinging too far, I think. And figuring out healthy boundaries is a process and can be a lot to understand and unpack and figure out and practice. But basically, healthy boundaries aren't about control. In fact, they're the opposite. And they're not about punishment or cutting people off. They're really just about clarity. And first, clarity with ourselves. Like, where am I really? And then they let others know where you stand. Because you know why? So resentment doesn't have to speak for you later, because it will. We have kind of that binary choice. We tell people what we need up front, what works for us or what doesn't, or resentment's going to come. And then typically we're going to have reactive boundaries, so to speak. We're going to act out. So boundaries don't disconnect us. They actually just reduce confusion. And I can tell you as an aside, the only people who want to stay confused are the ones who struggle with boundaries. Everyone else really loves the clarity because it helps them feel safe. They know where you are. And guess what? They're doing the same thing on their end. So we're speaking the same language. And one of the hardest things to do is to say no without guilt. And I've done several episodes on boundaries, got a lot of work on boundaries in my course if you're interested. But in a nutshell, know that it's not comfortable, because if boundary work were easy, you'd already be doing it. But just know that saying no doesn't feel bad because it's wrong. It feels bad because it feels unfamiliar and has old attachments to it. Old attachments meaning, oh, I must be selfish because I'm saying no. Oh, I must not give a crap about your feelings because I'm saying no. All these distortions that a lot of people learn in their families growing up from people who struggle with boundaries themselves. But actually, we can do them in really healthy ways. We can say things like, that really just doesn't work for me, sorry. There's no explanation, there's no apology. It's just simple and grounded. Doesn't work for me. We can be warm but clear. We can say, I can't do that, but I really appreciate you asking. Do you hear the empathy in my voice in the second part of that? There's nothing wrong with you asking me. In fact, I really appreciate you thinking of me. Just here comes detachment. Unfortunately, I can't do that. Both can be true simultaneously. Or what about when you're changing a pattern? I'm doing things a little differently right now, and so I need to say no. I like that for your close relationships because you're giving them the segue of how you got from A to B. I used to say yes all the time, but I'm working on a new pattern. So no, you're not crazy. I used to say yes all the time, and now I'm working on not doing that. Then if you were my client, I'd say, tell them why. Because I want you to trust me, because I want to trust myself, because I want to be calm and grounded. So I'm not going to lie and say yes when I really mean no. And when guilt is really loud, just say, that doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. I'm not available for that. You're allowed to be unavailable without being unkind. Again, you can't really do boundary work without a lot of detachment work. And that detachment means just because this doesn't mean that. I think it's a crucial part of boundary work we don't talk about enough, which is why I talk about it a lot here on the show. Because you have to look at your beliefs. Gosh, if I'm unavailable, that must be so unkind. No, not necessarily. Every context is different, which is why I always preach, you need people to bounce this off of who get it. And for someone to look at you and say, no, that wasn't unkind. Here's why. Here's what's going on in the situation. There's nothing wrong with what you did or said, and here's why. Here's the proof. Here's the evidence. And boundaries actually strengthen relationships. Again, they can really reduce resentment. When we proactively take care of ourselves in our relationships by in a healthy way, asking for what we need, negotiating needs, co-creating plans together, having our feelings validated, validating theirs. You don't have to feel resentful. Oftentimes we have resentment because we weren't honest with them. A lot of times they have resentment towards us because they find out we weren't honest with them. And that's why boundaries build trust. People are open and honest about what they are okay with and what they're not. The other boundary part of that is they show respect for the other person's boundaries as well. And they don't try to talk them out of them. They don't react with rage or shut down. So it becomes safe to say no, to ask for what we need, to negotiate. It clarifies expectations because without that, there can be a lot of fear, a lot of guesswork, people walking on eggshells, people overstepping boundaries because they don't know any better because no one said no to them. There's a lot of reliance on mind reading. This is where all that codependent stuff comes in, where you start managing outcomes and you start people pleasing because you see the look on someone's face and you're worried that they're pissed. I mean, we could go on, but I won't. I think you get the idea. The healthiest relationships I see and work with aren't the ones with endless flexibility. They're actually the ones with honesty and follow through. And that's the other part of boundary work is if there's congruence, walk matches talk, then there shall be trust. You've heard me say that before because it's true. And I have people show me that all the time when I work with relationships. They'll come back weeks later and say, yeah, when he told me he was going to do something and he followed through, it was great, Mary, because then I had trust. And I want to trust him and I want to respect him. And I don't want to have to worry about this. So boundaries make relationships safer, and I would dare say more expansive, not smaller. Expansive meaning then usually they become more intimate, closer. Growth is involved. There's more fun. How are you going to relax in a relationship and connect and be vulnerable when you don't even have trust? Can't trust yourself to say the truth. You can't trust that they're going to hear your truth. Do you even know their truth? And when we can share truth and create agreements that we, again, follow through and abide by, we can relax. We don't have to have that anxiety. And it's so important. I think it's the foundation of trust in relationships. We can't have trust without boundaries. And this is the work I support people with every day, learning how to notice where they override themselves, learning to practice clarity without guilt, which is a process, and they can't do it without support. Boundaries aren't about becoming someone else. A lot of people have that fear. They're actually connecting with who you really are and staying connected with yourself, which again creates more authenticity and safety for the other person, even if they don't like it or you at first, because you said no. So if you're practicing boundaries right now and it feels really awkward or uncomfortable, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. In fact, it just means you're interrupting those old patterns. And next week, we're going to talk about how to care without carrying. Like, how do you stay compassionate without absorbing what's not yours? So today we talked about, as another year begins, a lot of people feel the pull to reset, and at the same time, notice how hard it is to protect their energy and their time and maybe their emotional space. And so we explored why boundaries can feel really tender right now, particularly when the world feels really uncertain or overwhelming. And we talked about how stress and fear can impact our nervous systems and why this context really matters when we're trying to show up with clarity and self-respect. Now, boundaries are not walls or ultimatums oftentimes, but just these really quiet everyday choices that really define how we relate to ourselves and to others. If you need support around this, check the show notes. There's plenty of resources there. Reach out, connect. let's talk about how you can get the help that you need. All right, so thanks for listening as always, hanging out with me today. Hold on to that truth the best you can and your power and keep going. Find a way to pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.